Hello everyone and welcome back to FDG TV. My name is Mike Cook and I'm joined by one of our keynote speakers, Holly Nielsen. Thank you so much for joining us for a quick chat.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You gave your keynote earlier on today and you've had a few days now to settle into the conference. How are you feeling? How are you enjoying Lisbon and FDG?
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, it helps that it's beautifully sunny and I came from awful rainy England, so that's nice.
Yes, yes.
But yeah, it's fantastic. I was always, coming in as a historian, I was a little worried that maybe stuff would be slightly over my head and stuff, but actually there's been such a variety of papers and speakers and stuff. It's been super interesting.
Fantastic. And I was wondering if you could maybe give us like a 10-second preview, the headline of like your keynote that you gave earlier today. What was the...
Yeah, so I was talking about breaking out of the digital bubble and looking at longer histories of play and games. So basically just the importance of looking outside of the digital, looking at longer histories, looking at recurring themes, helping us to understand what is unique, what similarities do we share, and what can we learn from that.
And it was really interesting hearing about that in the context of like historical board games and doing lots of things that we never get a chance to do. Like you've been in archives, and I don't think it was clear during the keynotes, but a lot of those photos you had taken yourself in the archives.
Yeah, most of those of me like stood awkwardly like on a chair trying to get a picture with no shadow. Yeah.
And you mentioned this a little bit in your keynote, but what kind of connections do you see between kind of the fields that you've met today and your own?
I think a thing that's been really interesting is more and more seeing people talking about how to kind of capture play and how to record play and talk about it, because it's this really difficult kind of ephemeral thing to capture, particularly when it comes to kind of player emotion and experience. So yeah, talking about different methods and ways of doing that has been really interesting and very relevant to my research.
And one of the key ways that play has been captured kind of in your research were these interviews that you talked about, where people have been discussing their lives and how games had factored into that. And one of the things that I kind of wanted to ask during the Q&A but I didn't get a chance to is, where do you see, what's the equivalent of that today? Like what spaces do you see are being lost or not recorded in our culture of play today? Is there anything that you're thinking, like Holly Nielsen of 100 years from now is going to be like, why weren't they recording this? You know?
I mean, I think that all the time. I mean, anything to do with the internet is terrifying to me because it can so easily be lost. Well, with my stuff, at least with like the actual games themselves, unless there's a fire, touch wood, that doesn't happen, they're not going anywhere. Which is one of the reasons why I picked pre-digital analog, because of ease of access. So anything to do with the internet is inherently terrifying, but also the interviews that I use were done about 50, 60 years after the point that they're talking about. So there is always value in capturing the kind of the contemporary and the now, but there is also huge value in reflecting back and talking to people and capturing things within context, because you get something a bit different from that.
It's fascinating what you're saying about the archives burning down, because I guess that some of those games might outlast some of the games that we have right now that we're playing today. Yeah,
it's kind of wild to me that it's easier to play a really obscure military game from the 1800s than it is to play, the 3DS eShop just closed down and I was, panicking about, okay, what can I not play anymore from that?
Yeah, it's a really wild thing to think about. Before we wrap up, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about the future. Like, what's next for your research and where's your PhD heading?
So I'm kind of nearing the end of my PhD, so I've got a lot of writing to do, which is a boring answer, but writing up, and I think what I'm really interested in, which is where the talk was leading, and couldn't really get into it in the talk because it's like a whole other talk in and of itself, and I want to do more research on it, is understanding more broadly society's relationship with play and the tension between play needing a purpose, and particularly that's very relevant when it comes to kind of labour and our attitudes towards kind of capitalism and things like that, and this tension of play needing to be, you need to actually learn from it, you need to have skills from it, you need to have socialisation, it can't just be a thing in and of itself. And I think that leads to a lot of very kind of cyclical things happening around kind of panic, and particularly with access to space. That's what I'm interested in. Okay.
Well, I mean, we're excited to see maybe papers from you at the future at FDG, who knows. Before we wrap up, last question. I was thinking, is there a board game that you've come across in history that you think should be digitized? Like something that's been lost to time, but you think, actually, this could work now?
Oh, that is a really good question, because a lot of the games I look at are really bad games. Or I shouldn't say bad, they're not as interesting to play. I guess there's some, I'd be really interested to see, it's not necessarily my research, but kind of more ancient history and classical history of archaeological stuff of kind of taking these games where we don't really know the rules and then digitizing it and having lots of people have access to it and then finding their own ways of playing with it. I think that would just be really fascinating.
That's very exciting. That sounds like a great research project for the future.
I know, I just thought of it. I'm going to have to write that down.
Well, thank you so much for taking this time to have a chat. Thanks for coming to Lisbon and keynoting.
Oh, thank you.
And enjoy the rest of FDG.
Oh, thank you so much.
Right. Well, we'll be back with more FDG TV stuff throughout today and hopefully tomorrow as well. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you soon.